Right, another Chris is going to join us now. Chris Cahill, the President of the New Zealand Police Association, joins us now. Welcome to the show, Chris. Nice to have you on. It looks like you're heading to penalties, mate.
Yeah, good morning, Michael. Yeah, it does, unfortunately. I mean, it would have been nice to be able to get a settlement. I always suspected this would come up short, but I think the vote, 85% of full members voting, 75% rejecting it, that's overwhelming, and I think it tells you that it probably says more than just the pay issue. I think it tells you cops are pretty unhappy at the moment, to be honest, Michael.
Just give me some indication. How many police are we talking about here? Are we talking about all staff, or is it just rank and file?
Sorry, all sworn staff, including senior sergeants and below. So senior sergeants, sergeants and constables and detectives.
Right, so how many...
So about 10,000.
And then is there a police officers guild on top of that, is there?
There is a police officers guild. They only have about 120 members. We also represent officers and the senior executive. We represent about 75% of those as well, but are not part of this collective negotiation.
Right, so they're paid separately again?
Yes, they're paid separately again.
All right, okay. Now, what were you offered? What was the offer that your membership declined? Was it 4% or something?
No, so it's $5,000 backdated to the 1st of November last year, 4% in July this year, and a further 4% in July next year. And look, the 4% in July next year isn't really the issue. We think that's a fair part of the deal. We don't have a major concern with that. Yeah. The challenge we have with it's really talking about this the 2-year period from July last year when our collective ran out till July 2025, and that's a 6% 1 year, 4% the next. The problem is teachers were offered 6%, 4% and 4% in that 2-year period. So our offer is 4% below teachers.
Okay, so they got 14% and you got being offered 10%.
That's correct. And bear in mind, this is the catch-up for the years when inflation was over 7% and we got 3.5%. So, and when inflation was 6% and we got 3%. So, there's a bit of catch-up built in here as well.
The briefings that went to the Police Minister, Mark Mitchell, when he first assumed the portfolio, Chris, showed that the department of the police department faces a $320 million deficit next year. And unless it gets a major cash injection, it may not even be able to afford the current number of staff, sworn staff. Has that been an issue at all that's been discussed during the negotiations?
Well, certainly the fiscal constraints police are under has been a big part of it. And look, the reality is we negotiate with police, but it's really the Treasury, the Public Service Commission that are pulling the strings behind it. And it'd be great to have them in the room because, to be honest, at times you just feel like you're negotiating with people that don't really have any control over the situation. But, I mean, you've got to remember with these cost blowouts, there's been a hell of a lot of that as a cost of inflation that police haven't been funded for. So, look at the cost of petrol, for instance, over the last few years. And police 24/7, use of vehicles. There's all the underspending on infrastructure and repairs to police stations and upkeep of police stations and that. So all these are adding to the budget pressures. So the problem is when you're running a big organisation like police, your costs are going to go up and the government has to fund that.
Chris, I want to talk to you about something else too, if I might. And that is the constraints that are already on you and how that affects you operationally. So in terms of the financial wherewithal and the operational constraints currently. And that is there sufficient money? Like, for example, it seems to me that the police are a Monday to Friday operation at the moment, 8 to 5. I get that perception. And there's a reduced police presence at the weekends unless there is some sort of emergency call-out. Is that impression incorrect?
Well, certainly from if you're talking about the opening of police stations, things like that, certainly that's an impression. I mean, there's still obviously plenty of police officers working shift work. But some of those services that you might see during the week don't extend to the weekend anymore. And there's, without a doubt, there's a lot of constraints going on. And there's things that happen that just blow budgets out. As an example, the big one, look at the parliamentary protests. Look how much money police would have spent on that, but they got no extra budget for that. So that has to then come out of somewhere else, and that's why you're seeing less services in some areas.
So I see. So all the extra shift work, the extra staff, the extra resources came out of that budget. And that saving had to be found elsewhere.
That's right, and that's the nature with police. If you think of big events that have happened over the last few years, and there seems to be some, the mosque shooting, the White Island, the protests, these sorts of things, even the policing of quarantine centre, MIQs, things like this. No, police don't get extra funding for any of this, so it's a major problem, and it's just catching up. And when you add, rampant inflation in the same time, without a doubt, the government can say you spend a lot of money, but that's the cost of doing the business. Unfortunately, police can't control a lot of that.
Now, I'm interested in one of the callers just texted me at the moment. It says, "Look, police are like teachers; they get 12 weeks holiday a year, plenty of perks." Is that do police get 12 weeks holiday a year?
Police, no, we don't. Police get 5 weeks holiday a year, and that includes so 5 weeks holiday a year is what a police officer gets.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And do you get plenty of perks?
Well, I don't know what perks they'd be talking about. I mean, we don't get paid overtime, for instance. So nurses get paid overtime at time and a half and double time. Fireys get paid overtime. Police officers don't. But look, there's some big inequities out there. And the one I've been pointing out recently is if you're a 6-year constable, you're earning $22,000 less than a nurse with 6 years' experience. And the gap between teachers and police is just about the same now. I found out recently that if a electrician or someone with a trade went into teaching, they'd start, when they qualified, they'd start at the top of the teacher's band. If they join police, they'll wait 20 years to get to the top of the constable's band, which is pretty much exactly the same dollar amounts. So those are sort of iniquities that are driving some of this unhappiness with our current REM structure.
Yeah, so you've got a relativity argument going there. All right. The other issue for me is recruitment and retention. You don't seem to be having a difficulty recruiting at the moment, but you do seem to have a retention problem. Is that right?
Well, it's probably swinging the other way, to be honest. Police have done amazingly well over the last 5 or 6 years to recruit some big numbers. But over the last 9 months, that's turned. So definitely you would say that pool has dried up quite dramatically. We've still got technically to recruit at about 750 a year, if we want to get ahead of the extra numbers the government's looking for and deal with our attrition. We're not getting close to that at the moment. But it would be fair to say the numbers leaving haven't reached the levels that we probably would have predicted. Anecdotally, it appears there's been a lot of inquiries about Australia. But it does appear that a lot of waiting to see how this pay round settles. And also they're just waiting for some feedback of their colleagues that have gone through this just to see what it's actually like.
Can I also push back a little bit on the comparison with the nurses? They go through a lot more training than a police constable, and they that's pretty specialist training. I don't go through anywhere near that to become a police constable. What about that? And ditto teachers as well.
Look, I hear that, and I've always said they're different jobs. It is hard to compare, but overall, I think they should be getting paid for the money. Nurses got a tough job, but equally, 4,000 of them aren't assaulted a year. They're not getting firearms presented at them. So, they're all different sorts of roles, but I think there should be some form of equity, and the fact there's a $22,000 difference, I think, is far too big. Far too big. And look, this is before you start comparing the fact they get paid overtime, they get a 25% and 50% shift loading, things like this. So look, I'm not knocking it. I'm not for 1 minute saying nurses and teachers don't earn their money, but I'm just saying that there's a gap that has got far too big between that and a police constable. And they all do great work, and they're all different work. And a lot of nurses wouldn't want to be cops, a lot of cops wouldn't want to be nurses, and the same with teachers. But it's important that I think to see some equity in how they're paid.